I hadn't really thought much about the issue until I got into a discussion with the CEO of a large company here in Singapore where the individual was talking about the differences between family-owned and non-family-owned, and he was suggesting that family-owned businesses perhaps were disadvantaged. And I'm not that familiar with this from a research basis, but I had heard something like that before, and so we engaged in a conversation over breakfast about what were the specific reasons that they may be disadvantaged, and I asked the question of whether it was true or not. Is there any research on it? And he said he wasn't aware of it. I said, well, I'll go back and kind of check around, and realized there wasn't much research, and I also realized it has profound implications for the development of Singapore. If family businesses, which comprise a very large sector of the business community, were disadvantaged, then that's something we should know about. And so we together developed the notion of doing a research project around this. I wrote a proposal, and the company graciously agreed to fund a one-year project on this. It was a wonderful partnership around a very important area. Well, we gathered data from a sample of around 80 firms, half of which were family-owned businesses and half were non-family, and asked questions around basically 24 practices that organizations can adopt in terms of developing their executive talent, all the way from executive education, job rotation, exposure to top management in terms of presentations, global assignments, and so forth. And we're looking to see whether there was any validity to the aspect of family-owned businesses not engaging in those activities in the same degree that non-family-owned businesses were. Lo and behold, there's very little differences in terms of the average level of engagement in those activities across family and non-family. So it was kind of startling at first. And then we explored more thoroughly, and we looked at the intercorrelations between these types of practices, and we discovered that non-family firms are more correlated in the engagement with these practices, meaning that they're more tightly bundled, perhaps more strategically engaged compared to family-owned businesses. And there's research data that in the HR literature suggesting that broader HR kinds of activities, if bundled together, are much more related to the capacity of the firm. And so this is the same kind of phenomenon at the executive talent management area. So the differentiation is not so much in the average or the degree to which they engage in the practices, but also the kind of interrelationships. Possibly smaller firms, family-owned firms have lower levels of revenue. We do know that. Maybe they can't afford the same kind of strategic practices that non-family firms engage in. So that was one of the major findings of the study. We found some other things as well, equally interesting. These types of practices tend to be correlated with the capacity of the firm in terms of their pool of talented managements, the degree to which they feel that they have an adequate supply. And so all of these practices were, in fact, correlated with those elements. So we're making, hopefully, a contribution to the Singapore community. We'll issue this in a white paper, get it out perhaps in a formal publication in our journals. But it's a nice, in my opinion, from my own perspective, it's a wonderful combination of academics dealing with an actual problem that's articulated by a business entity. I generally would advise three things. At a personal level, I advise that person to develop as much as he or she can their communication skills, and more importantly is their verbal communication skills, their ability to talk, to debate, to persuade, to be nimble on their feet, okay? The second thing is exposure to the global environment in some fashion, either through travel personally or through your organizational experiences. Get some notion of not only developed countries, but underdeveloped countries, third world countries, that's where the world is heading, is to Africa, for example, learning about these new terrains that will be explored. Not just for a market perspective, but for developing your understanding and global awareness of what's going on. And the third thing it's fairly obvious, become technologically knowledgeable, to understand where technology is going, how you can utilize it, how you can leverage it. And you don't have to be an expert, but you need to understand and embrace that kind of new world that we're in.